a few visits. Let's start
Mm,
with the foreign minister, British foreign minister David Lammy.
mm,
He visited China not that long ago. So what
mm.
was the goal, and did he achieve the goal? What do you think?
Well, this is a fascinating story because, of course, if you wouldn't know about the fact that he visited China by following the British media. I mean, I follow the Chinese media. I know that he was there, but as I said, the British media has basically very much downplayed it. The only newspaper here that's covered it at all is the Daily Telegraph, which is viscerally anti-Chinese and
Mhm.
which went on and on and on about David Lammy appeasing the Chinese and bending the knee and all that nonsense. The thing to understand is that Britain is in an economic hole. As we are making this program, the British government is unveiling its budget, which is going to announce tax increases of 40 billion pounds. That's around $60 billion. Just to give some sense of what we're talking about, which for a country like Britain is a huge tax increase. And remember, we're a heavily taxed country
Yeah.
already. So people are very, very angry. The economy is in a very, very bad way. There is a colossal crisis of investment. Investment in Britain is the lowest in all the G20 countries. And it's been like that for a very long time. We're falling behind technologically. If you're talking about major British industrial brands, the only one I can think of that exists at all is Rolls-Royce, which is the aircraft producer, not the car manufacturer, which is German. It's Rolls-Royce cars are owned by BMW in Germany. But even Rolls-Royce, the aerospace maker, is losing ground. It's not produced a new engine for a very long time. We're apparently strong in a few niche products because we've got lots of rock groups and pop stars and all of that in Britain. Um, we make rather good sound systems. This is a sort of cottage industry with people working in attics and screwing things together, but nobody takes that very particularly seriously. So we are in a very difficult mess in Britain. Now, the previous Conservative government, when it was led by David Cameron, saw that and they
Hmm.
said, look, what are we going to do? We've got to try and attract foreign investment. Let's position Britain as a strong partner of China, which is the country with the enormous industrial and technological strengths. Let's work with the Chinese in terms of some of their banking projects. Let's forge a golden age of policy with China.
Hmm.
It was a plan.
Yeah.
Then, of course, David Cameron left the scene. The Conservatives then swung back and took an incredibly pro-American, pro-Atlanticist, anti-Chinese line. The media followed. All of that was thrown away. The economy continued its increasingly rapid decline. And the new Starmer government has come in and it's found itself looking at this terrible situation. And they're saying, well, maybe David Cameron at least got something right. So they send David Lammy to Beijing. The trouble is, David Lammy, by all accounts, is an extremely poor diplomat. I mean, he's got no background in diplomacy whatsoever. He's not considered to be a particularly sophisticated or intellectual or intelligent man. And I have to say, the idea of putting him up and expecting him to conduct an effective dialogue with Chinese officials, people like Wang Yi, I mean, no one in Britain, takes that idea seriously. So he's not he's not a strong figure to send to Beijing.
Hmm.
What this situation calls for is to get a proper dialogue resumed, to have Starmer himself, the Prime Minister, come to China at the head of a very, very strong delegation of business people and people from the academic world and scientists and industrialists to the extent that we had them. What Angela Merkel used to do on behalf
Yeah.
of Germany, that kind of thing, and try to forge a proper long-term relationship with China in the way, as I said, that Merkel, to some extent, successfully achieved with China. Nobody in Britain thinks in that way. Starmer doesn't. Starmer at the moment is very nervous about embracing China in that sort of way. But there is another factor, which is, of course, the British are worried about the American election. The relationship between Donald Trump and Keir Starmer is very bad and going to get even worse because Starmer stupidly meddled in the American election. It may be, it could be that the British, even though they don't want to particularly go to China, they might have to do that, and Starmer might very well find himself obliged to go to Beijing in the kind of way that I said. But he won't do it. He won't be comfortable doing it in the way that Merkel was comfortable doing it. And there'll be an awful lot of resistance still in Britain from all the usual Atlanticist crowd who are always going to be there, always criticizing, always speaking out against things like that, even when the imperative need for it is obvious for everyone to see.
Why do they always say, like Johnson and Starmer probably, why do they always feel like they have to pick a side? Why can't they have a good relationship with the US and with China? I mean, what is the thing that make them feel like they have to pick a side? Why?
Well, I've asked myself that question so many times. Why did Britain have to poison its relationship with Russia so completely? I mean, bear in mind, I mean, I know Russia much better than I know China, but I can say for a fact that Britain always had historically a rather good image, positive image in Russia. After all, the British never conquered Russia. They didn't go to Russia and burn down the imperial palace there. So, you know, the Russians didn't have that issue. I mean, you know, they like to read Sherlock Holmes stories and put on Shakespeare plays and drink British, you know, Scottish whiskey and do all of that sort of thing. And yet now, if you go to Russia, you speak to the Russians, they think of Britain as a complete enemy state. And I mean, it's universally seen in those terms. China, where the relationship was very difficult. I mean, you know, there's a lot of history, but the Chinese were prepared to put that to one side. We had, as I said, that brief period under Cameron when things appeared to be going really, really well, and then we threw it all away. Why? Why do we do this to ourselves all the time? Well, I think ultimately it comes down to this. The British have still not put behind them this imperialist concept that they developed in the 18th and 19th century. They still have that yearning to play a big global geopolitical role. And of course, since they don't have the power to do that on their own, that makes them draw to the Americans who speak the same language as they do and who think are more similar to Britain than they really are. And they end up, in effect, not just echoing what the Americans say and think and do, but going even further in order to impress the Americans with their own loyalty and their own part in this joint project. And, you know, if you listen to people like Boris Johnson, he talks about the need to preserve Western hegemony, for example. He actually talks like this.
And Annalena Baerbock talking about Germany, right? Merkel. She's in China now. I think. First of all, I don't know why is she there. It's not clear to me at all why she's there. And then, of course, when she's there, nobody even greeted her at the airport, which is very different. Angela Merkel got lots of respect in China, you know, because of what you just said. And with Baerbock, on the one hand, that she's calling Xi Jinping dictator, all that sort of thing. At the same time, you know, she's keep on going to China. What is she doing?
Well, you know, this is a good example of the mess that we are in Europe, because I mean, Germany more even than any other European country, needs to sort out its relations with China and do so urgently. Germany's in a major economic crisis. Volkswagen is about to close 3 of its factories in Germany. Now, unless you know Germany well, which I do, you cannot fathom what a shock that is going to be in the German psyche. I mean, Volkswagen is seen as an absolute core company in Germany. The whole German psyche is built around the auto industry, and Volkswagen is at its core. I am hearing of major problems in Daimler as well. The people who make the Mercedes cars. I don't want to talk about that because I was provided this information last night confidentially, so I can't describe what it is, but it looks awful. The Germany in spiraling industrial decline. Now, Germany was propped up for many years by 3 things. Firstly, the Germans themselves were very good at doing an awful lot of the things that they did. I mean, they were very skilled at engineering. They had those innate skills. Secondly, they had a good relationship with the Russians. They imported cheap gas and cheap oil, and not just those things, but many other things as well. And some German leaders, far-sighted German leaders like Gerhard Schröder, used to speak of Russia becoming Germany's economic hinterland. In other words, the 2 economies would work together, and that would provide economies of scale and would enable Germany to develop its industrial strength in that kind of way. And the third, which is absolutely crucial and must not be underestimated, was that Germany had a very, very good relationship developed over many years, cultivated by Angela Merkel with China. And all of that, again, has been thrown into chaos. So Germany is not investing in new technologies because the German industrial system at some point lost its way. Germany has knocked away its relationship with Russia. It's not getting cheap oil. It's lost its massive investments in Russia. All of that, the prospect of developing the economic hinterland, that's all gone. There's just the thread of the relationship with China that's left. And that is fraying. We've had this disastrous decision to impose tariffs on Chinese EVs, which Germany voted against and was overruled over. So they've got to try and find some kind of a way to work out a relationship with China. And German industry knows this. So they're pressing the German government. They're saying, look, we've got to find some kind of means to work towards some kind of understanding with China. We need it. We need to form industrial partnerships. Perhaps conceivably one day we might even need the Chinese to help us rebuild our relationship with the Russians. All of that. But then what do? They send Annalena Baerbock, who is not interested in any of these things, doesn't really understand them, and isn't even liked in China, because the political system in Germany is incapable of giving any alternative answer. It's not able to put up anyone else. So, instead of Scholz sending, somebody from the industrial or economic systems, maybe the head of the Bundesbank or someone like that to do those negotiations, he has to send Baerbock, because if he doesn't, then that will create problems within the coalition, because she'll be angry and the Greens will be angry and there'll be tensions, and all the Atlanticist media in Germany will start raising outcries and all that kind of thing. So they sent Baerbock, which ensures that any dialogue between Germany and China is going to fail. And it's not going to fail because the Chinese don't like her. They don't like her, but the Chinese are very practical people. If she was, screwed together, if she knew how to conduct negotiations, if she was interested in all of these things, they would talk to her, but as they talk to everybody, it will fail because Baerbock herself isn't interested in these things. She's not interested in talking about industrial partnerships and technical things. She has no background in this. It's not what she talks or thinks about. So she comes to China with no delegation to speak of. She walks down the plane, and it's not just the case that there's nobody there to receive her. Even more striking for me is that she comes down the plane and she's by herself. She's not brought anybody with her to really conduct serious discussions. So the Chinese say, well, why should we waste our time?
It's pretty astounding, I have to say, that I don't know, even the German ambassador wasn't there. It seems like, I mean, nobody seems even pay attention to what she's doing. That's pretty remarkable.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't help that I think most people now, even in Germany, think that we're in the final months of this government. I mean, there's going to be elections next year. Nobody expects the government to be re-elected. So nobody expects Baerbock to be foreign minister for much longer. So, I mean, in a sense, she's already a fading figure. But I mean, put that aside. If you really wanted to change the political dynamic in Germany, you'd have sent someone else. But nobody did.
Also, the Finland president, he's visiting China now. He seems is doing what you're saying that Britain should be doing. He brought with him a delegation, a business delegation, a sizable one. So he's there just to talk about trade. Is that what his goal is?
Yeah, I think it absolutely is. Finland is in a very similar situation in some ways to Germany and Britain, in the sense that, of course, their very strong economic relations used to be with Russia, and they've all fallen apart. But they do seem to have an understanding, a better understanding, that, as I said, trying to build up some kind of relationship with China is imperative for them. And that's why presumably they've gone. I wasn't aware of this, actually.
Yeah,
anyway,
he's there right now. Yeah, I think he went to China like 2 days ago. He's there. I think he's still there. Yeah. Right. Visiting Shanghai now. He was in Beijing and then now he's in Shanghai. So it does seem like a business trip, business oriented trip.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.